Darkcast Network, bringing our indie podcasts out of the shadows.
Just before we dive into this week's episode, here's a promo.
I'm Jackie Moranti, and I produce a podcast called Cause of Death, 100 Seconds to Midnight. Have you ever read or watched any post-apocalyptic fiction? Were you one of the first people to see The Road or I Am Legend when they came out? Do you wonder if those things could really happen? Could the world as we know it be toppled by a disease, a global crisis, or a natural disaster? I assure you that it could. My show talks about the precursors to apocalyptic events. I like to call it pre-apocalyptic nonfiction. I talk about history and how we never learned from it, the present and how we tend to ignore every warning sign, and the future and what it will mean if we don't take care of our resources. The hands of the doomsday clock have been set at 100 seconds to midnight for 3 years now. Can we make the hands turn back? Cause of Death, 100 Seconds to Midnight can be found wherever you listen to podcasts.
CrimeDivers. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jill.
And welcome to today's episode.
Hello everybody, welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome.
Welcome to CrimeDivers.
Yeah.
So Jill, as we always do, where in the world are we?
We're in the UK.
Okie dokie. And the title?
Murder in the Classroom. Oh. That was my plug's coming out my laptop. Oh, what's going on? Right, yeah, Murder in the Classroom it's called.
Okie dokie. Shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in. So each year in Britain, nearly 20,000 teachers are attacked by their pupils.
I can't believe that.
In 2014, almost 1,000 pupils were caught by police with weapons in school. Some of these weapons included a taser, a meat cleaver, axes and a cutthroat razor, and the youngest child was only 8.
Wow.
And I'm like, how does a child get their hands on a meat cleaver?
Yeah.
I mean, do many people have meat cleavers in their houses? I mean, because I don't.
Unless their parents are
A
butchers.
butcher, yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
I
That's
I don't know.
where you would get it, is a butcher
But
shop.
the fact that they've even got one is scary.
Yeah, it is. So, on the morning of Monday, the 28th of April, 2014, West Yorkshire Police were contacted at 11:48 a.m. by the Yorkshire Ambulance Service, who were attending a report of a teacher having been stabbed at Corpus Christi Catholic College in Leeds. Mm-hmm. So Anne Connor was born on the 5th of April in 1953, and when she grew up she married Donald Maguire. And the couple were married for 37 years and had 2 daughters. Donald described Anne as an incredible person and an outstanding wife and mother. She was wonderfully kind and giving, and she approached every task with an honesty, a freshness, a sincerity, and a purity that was quite unique. She had 2 sisters, and one of them said that she had lots of qualities, and the main one was her ability to connect with children and young people. She had a unique way of seeing what they were capable of, and with her patience and her belief in them, she encouraged them to go out in the world and achieve success and fulfil their dreams and ambitions. She loved people and she wanted to do her best for people. No one had a bad word to say about her. Her students, her colleagues, like everyone who knew her always had positive things to say about her. Mm-hmm. Everyone who had worked with Anne said she was a wonderful teacher and that she inspired so many pupils. So on the morning of the 28th of April 2014, Anne got to work early, as she always did. She was 61, and for her whole working life she had been a teacher at Corpus Christi Catholic College in Leeds as a Spanish teacher.
Oh wow.
And in 5 months, after having taught for 41 years, she was due to retire. Right. So she only had 5 months to go. Uh-huh. So Anne loved working there and she had great relationships with both the students and the teachers. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, this would turn out to be her last day. So William Cornick, known as Will, joined Corpus Christi in year 7, which I believe is 11 to 12-year-olds. So for us, it would be like first year at secondary school.
Right.
And when this took place, he was 15. So he was 15 in 2014. So Will came from a loving and supportive family. His mum and dad had split up when he was in primary school, and he lived with his mum in a nice house about a mile away from school, but he had a good relationship with both parents. He loved spending time with, he'd go and spend his weekends with his dad, and they were both supportive.
Yeah.
Good family life. He was one of the brightest pupils at Corpus Christi, passing 5 GCSE exams early, like the year before. So when he was 14, he passed 5 GCSE exams.
All right.
How good is that? That's quite impressive.
Uh-huh.
So he was described by teachers as intelligent, articulate, very bright, thoughtful, and would think before he spoke. So this makes me think that he wasn't prone to being like hot-tempered or lashing out on the spur of the moment.
Just sound like a chilled out.
Yeah, like people who think before they speak, not me.
No, definitely not you.
You would think that anything they were going to do, they would think about it before they did it.
Yeah.
So he was polite, and he had 100% attendance at school. So in the 4.5 years at the school, he only had 5 incidents of misbehaviour, which is quite impressive. So I think I probably had more than that.
Yeah, probably.
Well, so did you probably.
Yeah, we turned up to school.
And classmates described him as unlikely to cause trouble. I didn't cause trouble, I just didn't go very often.
Exactly, that's what I mean. It'd be a good idea to start turning up for school first. I didn't cause trouble either,
You just hung around with people that were in trouble?
Yeah. Well, I did do a couple of things, but...
Yeah. Okay, anyway, this is not about you.
I turned out alright.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, you turned out wonderful, dear.
No, thanks.
However, he had been on holiday to Cornwall when he was 12, and he had collapsed, and he was rushed to hospital. And he was later diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Right.
And he was really upset when he later found out that he wouldn't be able to join the army due to the diabetes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think that's when he started to change, when he realised that his diabetes was life limiting, because he wasn't getting to go and do what he wanted to do.
That's still the case now, though.
Well, it was only 2014. Well, when he was 12, that would have been 2011 or whatever. A psychiatrist said that everything he wanted and desired had been affected by the diabetes, and that had psychological consequences for Will. So the consequences were a chronic sense of unease within himself and with the world, and a chronic sense of anger. He also said that he thought that what probably happened was that the anger got focused onto something because Will couldn't deal with it, and sadly he became fixated on Anne Maguire, his Spanish teacher. So it was then that he started to act differently, and he started sending messages to his friends on Facebook saying that he wanted to attack his teachers, but especially Anne Maguire.
Right.
His friends later said that he didn't hide his hatred for Anne. Like, she was a popular teacher, as I've already said. Like, the majority of the kids loved her, but for some reason, Will detested her. And I'm not quite sure, but I did see in one report, so I'm not sure if it's actually true, but I did, so I didn't actually write it down, but I'll just say it anyway because I can remember it.
Hey.
Is that she had stopped him from going on a school trip because he hadn't handed in his homework or something like that.
Right.
Not sure if that's true, or if for some reason...
So could it be like a trigger to then focus his...
I'm not sure. I didn't actually, apart from that one report, I didn't see anything else explaining why he detested her so much. So, don't take that as gospel. I'm not sure. So, and he told one friend, either she must die or I'll commit suicide. So it was, basically either her or me.
Right, okay. It seems a bit extreme, but okay.
Yeah, I know. Over several months, his threats on social media turned from hatred and saying nasty things to then talking about murder. So he said things like, the one absolute fucking bitch that deserves more than death, more than pain, torture, and more than anything we can understand. Anne Maguire is a bitch and I hate her and she deserves to die. I mean, come on, that's angry, isn't it?
I'm surprised nobody saw that and intervened in that moment. Like, even if one of his friends had told their parents and they could have contacted his parents or the school or anything like that, it seems that...
I don't know, I think maybe they just didn't take him seriously. I know kids say things. I mean, personally, I never heard anybody saying anything that bad when I was at school. I mean, you talk about how much you hate your teachers.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there was definitely teachers I didn't like, but...
I got a punishment exercise once because my English teacher was off one day, so we had a substitute teacher, and we were just sort of left to our own devices. We weren't really doing anything. So I was writing a letter to my friend who had moved. She'd moved down to England. So I was writing a letter to her. So I was writing it in the middle of my daughter, and I was writing about the fact that he had left, that the teacher wasn't there, and he was such a dickhead and all the rest of it. But I forgot to take it out of my daughter. So I went in, the next time I had English, I went into the classroom and I was like, why is there a punishment exercise on my desk? And it was for writing letters to my friends when I was, when I was in school, and I thought, and I did actually feel bad, because I thought, he's read that and he knows that I think he's a dickhead, and that's not very nice.
No, that's not nice at
all.
all.
I did actually feel guilty about that.
I'm surprised. But yeah, that's it. I mean, like, you can dislike your teachers and say that, I can't stand them or whatever, but I don't ever remember, certainly myself or anybody saying, I want to kill my teacher or whatever. It's
extreme.
Yeah, but then I think that's unfortunately the generation that has been in the last few years more so, because I think in our years, I mean, I'm a bit that it probably still happened, of course, but I just certainly didn't experience it myself, so maybe it's something that's...
Well, I don't know, but I mean, he even sent a Facebook message to some friends to see if any of them would kill Anne for a payment of £10.
Wow.
So obviously they refused, and they probably didn't take him seriously, and I'm thinking, well, if somebody's only offering you £10, I wouldn't take that seriously either.
No.
£10 is, how much is that in dollars?
Like
$13, $14, $15, something like that. You know, sorry, I can't convert any other currency because I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that's not a lot of money.
No.
I mean, you can't even really get... I mean, a packet of cigarettes costs that much these days, or maybe more than that, doesn't it? So I wouldn't have took somebody seriously if they asked me to kill somebody for that much.
No.
So Will decided on Thursday the 24th of April, so that was the Thursday before, that he was going to kill Anne Maguire, and how he was, he'd been thinking about how he was going to do it, and he decided that he was just going to get a knife out of the kitchen drawer and use that, because obviously a knife is easy to obtain.
Of course, yeah.
So that weekend, he spent the weekend with his family. He went to a grandparents' birthday celebration, and, he acted as normal. Nobody noticed anything different about him. He was just, the usual Will, he was enjoying himself, spending time with his family. Nobody had any idea about what he was planning to do on that Monday morning. So he stayed at his dad's house that weekend, so I'm assuming it must have been his dad's parents' celebration. And on the Monday morning, he asked his dad to drop him off at his mum's before he went to school. So his dad drove him over and left him there. I'm assuming he probably just thought that Will had to pick up something, some schoolwork, some homework or something like that. So he just left him there because, obviously she was... And he just made his way to school from his mum's house. But Will took a kitchen knife out of the drawer and put it in his bag, along with a small knife that he'd been carrying around for some time. And he headed off to school. So Will had 2 lessons that morning. So he had English and science. And during science, he was telling other students that he wanted to attack Anne Maguire. And he even showed them the knives. So most of the other children, they were like, oh, he's a bit odd, a bit of a loner. They just didn't believe him.
But even
just thought he was talking rubbish.
Even when they saw the knives, I mean, to me, that would...
Well, the few of them that did believe him were scared of him because he threatened them. So he said that he would stab anyone who told on him.
Yeah, I suppose.
So, I mean, you can totally understand that. It's not the other kids' responsibility.
Oh, no, of course it's not.
I mean,
it's just... Obviously, you think, why wouldn't they have gone and told a teacher or whatever? But I suppose if
they're being threatened.
Yeah, if they're being threatened in that situation, I mean, that's easier said than done, isn't it? So
of course, I mean, I'm terrified if somebody was threatening me with a knife.
Yeah, absolutely.
So immediately after morning break at 11 a.m, Will entered the classroom for his GCSE Spanish revision class. It was his 3rd class of the day, and his teacher was Anne Maguire. So for the first... 10 minutes or so of the lesson, there was no problem. Mrs. Maguire, she divided the class into 2 rooms, and she was in one and Will was in the other. So he took the kitchen knife out of his bag and he showed it to one of his friends. He asked the friend if he thought it would be sharp enough, and he showed him that he was going to hide the knife up his sleeve. He then got up, walked away, and then turned around and looked at his friend and winked at him. And then he went into the other classroom where Anne Maguire was, and she was bending over, like, talking to a pupil while she was helping her.
Yeah.
And Will approached her from behind, armed with a large knife, and he just started to attack her. He stabbed Anne repeatedly and plunged the knife into her back and neck 7 times, and one cut straight through her jugular vein.
Oh, no.
So the other children could obviously see what was going on, and later some of them said that there was just no emotion and like whatsoever in Will's face when he was carrying out the attack. But one girl, she said that she thought that she saw a degree of pleasure in his face while he was doing it.
Yeah.
So Anne managed to get away from Will and she ran into the corridor, but he followed her and just continued like stabbing her.
Bloody hell.
Another teacher, Susan Francis, who was the head of languages, heard Anne screaming, and she opened her classroom door to see what was going on, and she saw Anne like bleeding profusely.
Yeah.
And she grabbed Anne, she pulled her into her classroom, closed the door, and like she put her foot against the door to stop Will getting in.
Yeah.
So he was trying to get in, knife in hand. So like, can you imagine how terrifying that must have been?
Totally.
But quite quickly, he just dropped the knife and then walked away.
Right, okay, yeah.
And then this sounds familiar. Just that bit. Have we not discussed something like that before? I just had a, in your head when something rings a bell. I really hope we haven't done this case before. We haven't, have we?
No, we haven't.
I don't remember.
That doesn't ring a bell to me, so
Oh.
maybe you've listened to it somewhere else, or have you heard something else of it, or...
What, listen to another podcast?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think I've heard another podcast, right? But then I've listened to that many podcasts, and I don't know, but that was just when he was trying to get in, knife in hand, and she was on the other side of the door, and then he dropped the knife and walked away. That for some reason that's ringing a bell in my head.
Doesn't ring a bell in my head whatsoever.
So maybe I've heard this one, or maybe there's another case similar to that I've heard.
Maybe.
But we haven't done one like this then.
No, I haven't heard it. Definitely not.
Okay, can you imagine though if we'd already done it? And we're sitting here going, no, we haven't done that one before, and our listeners are going, you did that like 2 months ago.
Yeah, no. We definitely haven't, because I haven't heard this, so
Right.
there's no bells ringing in my head.
Okay, right, sorry about that. So he just dropped the knife and just walked away. And he walked back to his classroom, sat down and just continued with his work, like as if nothing had happened.
Right.
And he stayed there until 2 teachers came into the classroom and took him away.
I was surprised they actually did that. I thought they would have just phoned the police and let the police deal with him.
Well, maybe shut. I would have thought that they would have phoned the police and shut him in the classroom so they obviously couldn't.
Yeah, because I mean, all right, he's dropped that knife, but
He still had the other one.
Well, they didn't know that.
Yeah.
They didn't know what else he had on him, so that was quite, I don't know, brave, maybe not.
Well, I don't know, but that's what happened anyway. So, meanwhile, the emergency services are being called, and an ambulance took Anne away, but she lost consciousness in the ambulance. The paramedics and then the hospital staff did everything they could to save her, but unfortunately, Anne passed away in hospital with her husband beside her. She was 61 years old and only months away from retirement.
That's awful. That really is awful.
Yeah, and I think she had plans for her retirement. I think she was thinking about buying like a wee house and on the Spanish coast and stuff like that. Awful.
I mean, worked hard all her life and was about to hopefully enjoy some retirement and then didn't even get that chance.
Absolutely awful. So the police arrived at the school and they said that Will appeared to be unaware of the severity of his actions.
Really?
He acted as if he had done nothing wrong and he seemed proud of it. And it was almost as if he was expecting the day to just carry on as normal. Like, I'm just going to go back to my work. I'm going to, it'll be lunchtime soon. I'll go to my lesson after that. It just had no sense in that moment that what he had done had just changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about, that was good times. And, and he was saying that he had an adrenaline rush and...
What, like it was just something fun that he did?
Yeah. So he knew what he'd done, but he just didn't, and it was if he enjoyed it, but he just didn't seem to understand...
The consequences of...
Yeah, exactly. The severity of what he'd done.
Like, there would actually be consequences to what you've just done.
Yeah, so after Will was taken into custody, it was revealed that there was a 2-month period in 2011 when he had self-harmed, and it was at this point that staff and pupils at the school noticed a change in his behaviour. It wasn't a total change. I mean, this wasn't like a dysfunctional child. Like, as I said earlier, he went on to do really well at school. I mean, he passed his exams early, but it was definitely noted that he was just acting a bit different.
Yeah.
And he'd been carrying a small knife for a while, which he'd bought that small knife, and he said that he'd kept it for safety. Which, I don't know, was everybody carrying knives around? Looking at statistics, it probably was.
Possibly.
Yeah. So after the murder, the police found photos of knives on his phone as well, so he was obviously interested. I mean, they kind of explained it as obsessed with knives, but I'm like, is it an obsession? I don't know. He's interested in them because he had pictures and that on his phone. So as well as his interest in knives, the police inquiries began to turn up other evidence that suggested Will was becoming frustrated at school and that his anger was turned towards Spanish and the Spanish teacher in particular. In November 2013, so that'd been a few months before, there had been a parents' evening and both Will's parents attended, and they noticed a reluctance on Will's part to keep on studying Spanish. But understandably, I mean, they just put that down to, the fact that all students, I mean, some of them enjoy some subjects more than others, don't they?
Some of them hate.
And Spanish wasn't one he was particularly keen on. That's just the way they thought, and you can't blame them for that.
I did French at school, I have to say. I didn't particularly enjoy French, so,
I hated every lesson at school.
Yeah.
As you may have gathered, listeners, I didn't like school.
Yes. Didn't go half the time.
I actually did. It wasn't that long. I only, because it my Sky for 3 weeks in a row. And that was it, really. It just seems a lot, but it wasn't. It was only 3 weeks.
Alright, fair enough.
Where are we? So, police did a search through Will's internet history, and they discovered all the messages that he'd been sending to friends talking about wanting to kill Anne. So they could see that he'd been planning it, and this wasn't a spur of the moment attack. And I'd said earlier, like, it didn't seem the type to do spur of the moment things,
Yeah.
But what else they realised is that Will had actually planned more deaths. One was a young pregnant teacher, and the other was a senior teacher at the school. So he told the police that in his mind, this was going to be a triple homicide.
Oh, right.
So if Anne's colleague, Susan, if she hadn't stepped in and pulled her into the classroom, Will said that he would have continued on to find the other teachers. So I think if Anne hadn't managed to get out of the classroom, he would have made sure that he'd killed her, and then went on to murder the other two without any of the other teachers knowing.
Right.
But because obviously he's seen that one of the teachers knew what was going on now, so I think that's why he dropped the knife and just went, do you know what, it's not going to happen now.
So in some ways, maybe save the other two in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but still...
Yeah, I mean, it's...
But and remember, that's in his mind. I mean, I'm assuming that one of the kids would have alerted a teacher before he managed to get to the other teachers anyway.
Yeah.
But I think in his mind, that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
He was just going to kill Anne and then go on to kill the other two.
God, thank God. I mean, obviously it's bad enough he sadly managed to kill Anne, but thank God he never got any further as well.
I know. So how could he be defended? Like, how do you defend the seemingly indefensible? So defence barrister Richard Wright QC said, quote, "When my solicitor and I spent time with Will, we were obviously keen, as were the experts, to try and understand why he acted in this way, and given him every opportunity to tell us whether there had been anything in his life, even something he'd never mentioned before, that had caused or contributed to his personality. For example, had he ever been sexually abused? Had he ever been physically abused? Was there some incident in his life that he was keeping to himself, but that had materially affected him?" And he was adamant that there was nothing. And he was adamant there was nothing at all in his background or childhood that would have caused him to behave this way.
Right.
So, as I said, I mean, he did come from a good family, they were supportive, they were, So, whilst Will provided little or no information to explain his motivations to his legal team, his discussions with a forensic psychiatrist, John Kent, were more enlightening. He said, quote, "Will's account of what happened on that day was very disquieting because it was dispassionate. This is extremely unusual. His exact words will convey the sense of callousness and brutality that he conveyed to me, and that he's impressed upon all who've seen him." So he said, the killing was, Will had said, this is what I'm still quoting him.
Yeah.
"The killing was always on my mind since year 8. The thought of homicide, murdering her. I was always telling my friends the bitch was terrible. I pretty much decided after months of thinking life was pretty shit, I couldn't see myself passing college and had no hope of doing anything.
See, that just surprises me that he says that, considering you'd said he'd done well in his GCSEs and stuff like that. So where does he...
I think it's because of the army. Because as he went on to say, I tried to apply for the army, but they said no because of my diabetes. So I think...
Well, a failure, basically.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, he could have went on to do so many other things.
Well, exactly.
But... You know, this is obviously in his mind. He wanted to be in the army. He couldn't be in the army, and that was it. His life was fucked. He was a failure, which of course he wasn't. No. But that's what he's thinking. Yeah. I knew what I was going to do. It was what I did. I know the victim's family will be upset, but I don't care. In my eyes, everything I've done is fine and dandy. End quote. So, he thinks everything that he's done is fine and dandy.
On what planet?
His planet. So he made other comments about Anne, and at one point described her as being barely human. Anyway, I don't know what to say about that. He didn't give a shit about what he'd done to her, but also he was happy about what he'd done and proud of what he'd done. So John Kent went on to say, quote, "You have to put those thoughts in the context of someone who is killed. This is a boy who was already killed at that point. So yes, they are genuine thoughts. They're not just about teenage bravado. No. If they were teenage bravado, we may not have got to this position. We wouldn't have had a homicide," end quote. So whilst legal and other professional experts tried to determine the reason behind the crime, Will's parents had to come to terms with what their son had done.
No, that would have been horrible for them as well.
They were in a complete state of shock and disbelief. I mean, in a single day, everything that they'd known and experienced of their son, who they loved, had been completely turned upside down.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, if he was going off the rails or acting... Maybe, I mean, I don't think anybody would expect their son to do that, but maybe it wouldn't be as much as a surprise. Yeah. But considering...
If he was doing well at school...
He was just normal behaviour.
Just like totally out of the blue.
Yeah. So they were hoping that the psychiatric assessments would reveal that Will had been suffering from some sort of treatable illness, and it was very difficult for them when they were told that he had a personality disorder. So a doctor described Will as having an emerging personality disorder with some marked psychopathic traits with a preoccupation with homicide. If he had been older, he would have been described as a psychopath, but doctors don't like to give that label, diagnosis, I don't know what, that label to a person under 18.
Right, okay.
I don't know why, because that sticks with you for life kind of thing, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So they said he had some psychopathic traits.
Right, okay.
So the doctor said that the treatment for personality disorders is also complex, and in the case of someone like Will Cormack, it will take months, possibly years, before they would know the full extent of his mental state. So his parents were hoping it was just some sort of, I don't know, something that could be treated and not... So for them to find out that he had something that for years they probably wouldn't even know the full extent of it, must be absolutely...
Oh, exactly.
Oh, I don't know, just awful.
Yeah, probably they just don't know how to get their head around it, really.
So the doctor said that treatment for I've just said that, haven't I? So... Okay, I'll just move that page up a bit.
Find your place.
Yeah. So Will didn't have a trial, as he couldn't deny that he was the person responsible for the killing. So that would have meant that the only way in which he could have had a trial would have been to advance some form of medical defence, namely diminished responsibility. So what that effectively says is that the person has committed a deliberated killing, but the responsibility of that killing was reduced because there's a psychiatric condition. But John Kent, the forensic psychiatrist, said, quote, "I decided he was not ill or not acutely ill. No voices, no psychosis, no delusions. He was not insane legally, and that diminished responsibility... That diminished responsibility was not an option in this case." So yes, he had a personality disorder, but he wasn't having psychosis or, it wasn't diminished responsibility. Yeah. So he had no choice but to plead guilty, which he did. And that meant that the principal hearing in the case was the sentencing hearing. So Anne's family attended, and her sister Denise said that when she first saw Will, she just saw a regular schoolboy, unremarkable, nothing about him that would tell you what he'd just done or what he was capable of. She said he was emotionless, he didn't react in any way to what was being put to him, and he just didn't show any remorse whatsoever. He seemed to feel a bit sorry for what he'd done to his family, but he didn't care what he'd done to Anne
and
her family. But that is probably a product of his condition, because he doesn't have empathy. So he doesn't understand why Anne's family or friends would be upset by this, because in his mind, he is right. And when he says that she was a terrible person and that the world is a better place without her, that's him, like that, because that's how distorted his thinking is. So while we're going, why doesn't he care? Does he not realise what he's done? In his mind, is completely different. He's done the right thing in his mind, which
that's awful.
I know. So part of having that type of personality disorder is the ability to conceal from the outside world what is happening inside, and that's part of what makes him so dangerous. So on the Monday the 3rd of November 2014, at the sentencing, Mr. Justice Coulson said that Will showed what he called a total and chilling lack of remorse. He said that Will would serve life imprisonment with a minimum of 20 years before any possible release date, and he added that release date might never come. So Will's legal team, they appealed his sentence. The issue for them was whether the minimum term was too long. His defence barrister said, quote, "It's meant to reflect the culpability of the offender and the harm done, but 20 years for a child," because we have to admit, this kid's 15.
That's right,
You know, a sentence longer than he had been alive was an extremely long sentence, and in our view, it's just too long, end quote. But the judges disagreed, and they took just 15 minutes to reject the appeal. Although a dangerous killer was safely behind bars, for many, the lack of a trial meant several questions surrounding the case remained unanswered. So one journalist, Gerard Tubb, I think he's a Sky News reporter, he said, quote, "There have been very few opportunities as a journalist to ask any questions of anybody. Quite clearly, this was just the most appalling incident to happen. For it to happen in a school in front of children makes it so much worse." Because imagine these children as well that have witnessed that. They're going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
That would be quite horrific.
I would think that could impact them,
totally.
PTSD and, all that. We know that he was telling other children that he wanted to see harm happen to Anne Maguire. This wasn't a child who was hiding what he thought. This was a child who seemed to be advertising it. He had the Grim Reaper picture, the Grim Reaper on his Facebook page, telling not just one friend that Anne Maguire deserved to die, but showing others in school later the knives that he brought in. Yet apparently we're told that not only did none of these people that he told go to a teacher or anyone in authority, but they didn't tell anyone else who then went to anyone in authority either. And there are some people who say that seems odd. That's
what I was saying to you earlier. I thought, I'm surprised that none of his friends even said it to their mum or dad or somebody else. That then they might have went and took it further. It seemed, because if I had a friend that was saying stuff like that on Facebook, I might not want to go and report it, but I might say it in passing to somebody. Oh, did you see what so and so's put on their Facebook? And you think it would get back and get round, and maybe somebody would then go, actually, that's not right. I'm going to go and report that or speak to his parents or whatever. But as I said, I know it's easier said than done.
Well, somebody might have. But anyway, there are lots of questions being asked about what was known by the school. We didn't have a trial. All we had was a sentencing hearing, which means that we only get one side of the story. We get an examination of the state's case against the killer. Will Cornick had obviously admitted, yes, I did it, but we didn't have anyone who could publicly explore the points that were made in the state's case. So whilst we were told that no one could have possibly have known, and that there was only one person responsible for this, and that it was inexplicable, that didn't really seem to be a complete examination of the facts. We have subsequently learned from one of the pre-inquest hearings that there is a piece of evidence that at least one child did try to pass something on. It was stated in front of the coroner that a pupil had gone to the head boy and had allegedly been told not to worry about it. And that pre-inquest review was also told that Leeds City Council disputed the interpretation of that evidence. So we have that on public record. The court was told at the sentencing that no one could have known, and I have subsequently been told that there was nothing in any of the witness statements that suggested that, that anyone had tried to bring this to anyone's attention. So it does seem to be a discrepancy, end quote. So somebody is saying that they did say something when they were told, but it's not in any of the... Because I just think, as you already pointed out, so there's no point in me going into it, but yeah, I agree with you. I think at least one person would have...
Well, I think you just know what Facebook's like. Things spread like wildfire on Facebook. Like,
yeah, but it could have just all been between children, and not. But I just don't believe that not one of them would have said something.
I'd say just even said in passing to somebody that maybe wasn't quite in the situation, and they might have thought, oh, and then somebody might have said, you know, it sort of goes, but obviously not.
We don't know.
No.
So on Monday the 29th of September 2014, a memorial was held for Anne at Leeds Town Hall. It was attended by over 1,200 people, with hundreds more gathered outside to watch on the big screens outside. Schools across the region held a minute's silence to remember Anne. Her family said that the public support had been off the scale and they couldn't have got through it without them. Between April 2016 and early 2017, because remember I gave you sort of statistics. So now that was 2014. So that between April 2016 and early 2017, 1,369 weapons were found in British schools. And between 2015 and 2017, at least 47 children found with weapons were under 10 years old.
Wow.
And 3 of those were under 5.
Shut up.
5.
Under 5? What?
Imagine. I mean, I can't... even under 10 is just...
I'm not even funny, right? But obviously, you know, my daughter's at school and she's in primary 3.
So she's 8.
She's 8. I mean, obviously I'm thinking of back from when she was obviously like 5 as well. Like, I would pack her school bag, you know, I'd make, you know, I would check her bag, make sure she's got everything. Then I would get her dressed in the morning, you know, the jacket. So there's no way that she would have
been able to.
So, like, how are these kids... how are the kids' parents not realise that their kids have something?
Well, there was only 3 of them, so these 3 parents obviously didn't do what you did. They didn't check their child's bags and whatnot.
Like, if you're making, if they're having like packed lunches and stuff, I mean, you're
the child's maybe sneaked it in afterwards. But I just don't. I can't see how a 5-year-old would even think of that, though. You know, it is
like, where does that come from?
I mean, here, a kid starts school at 5 years old. In England, I think it's 4.
Yeah.
So that's just a little toddler that's just slightly older than a toddler.
Yeah.
And they're thinking about getting knives.
Well, exactly.
That blew my mind. That.
For what reason? I mean, surely at that age, I mean, as far as I'm aware, most kids, they enjoy going to school, they go to play, they learn a bit, etc., etc. Like, where's...
Well, it depends. I suppose it must just all depend what area you live in, like.
Oh, I guess. Well, yeah. I guess so.
You know, maybe obviously the same as everywhere. There's some places that are rougher than others, and maybe a lot of the kids, because maybe older kids are going about with knives, the younger kids are saying, well, if they've got them, we have to protect ourselves. It's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, according to Wikipedia, an inquest was held into Anne's death in November 2017. So the inquest was supported by Anne's family, but it was resisted by the Yorkshire Police, Corpus Christi School and the Leeds City Council. The inquest was basically, it was questioning why Will's fellow students hadn't reported that he planned to kill Anne, or that he had brought a knife to school. It returned a verdict of unlawful killing and found that opportunities to prevent her murder were missed.
I agree with that.
So an author called Anthony McGowan, he was taught by Anne in the 70s. I think he's quite a successful author. And he wrote an article about her in the Telegraph, in which he said, quote, "What I remember most about her was her determination to get the best from us, to put into our heads what we needed to get through, to get by. That caring, that intensity could sometimes spill over into fierceness, goaded by some jackass, or when she came across bullying or unkindness in others. But it isn't the fierceness that I remember when I think of her. I think of her face, always on the verge of a smile. She's got a beautiful smile. When you see a picture of her, she's got a beautiful smile. Her consideration, the way she listened when you spoke to her and tried to answer rather than fob you off. I remember her kindness and consideration for me, end quote. I thought, well, that was nice. So the Anne Maguire Arts Education Fund was set up in May 2014. The fund provides bursaries for funding the enhancement and personal development of young people under 18 through music, drama, language and dance, which were all her kind of favourite subjects. So if anyone would like to donate to the fund or just take a look at the website, it's annemaguire.org. So, and it's Anne without an E, so annemaguire.org. I had a wee look and, yeah, they're doing good things. It's still going now because that was like 2014. Yeah. That was quite quick, that actually, because she died in April 2014, and there was that fund was set up, and they've raised thousands of pounds they've raised. So yeah. But I reckon, as you said, somebody there must have been opportunities passed. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that it could have been prevented. No. They might have had concerns, but I doubt. Well, I don't know, because I mean, if somebody's threatening murder, I mean that's quite a big.
It's quite a big thing. But
quite a big. Listen to us, quite a big thing. It's a bloody massive thing.
Of course it is. Yeah, I mean, but as I say, I'm just surprised. Like, a kid that's seen that's not just, I say, mention it, even if it wasn't intended to. They want to do something about it, but just not mentioned it in conversation to somebody that, wasn't a friend on Facebook or maybe a parent or whatever, and then they might have thought, oh, that's not right, and.
Yeah, well, as I say, I mean, maybe somebody did, maybe more, but it's just not been. I know. Maybe it has been reported, or concerns have been mentioned, but because the school didn't do anything about it, they didn't take it seriously or whatever. That's why there's no record of it, because the school are trying to cover their arses, aren't they?
Probably.
And the council and everybody, they'll all be trying to cover their arses because if they were told, they didn't do anything about it. So they would be at fault.
Absolutely.
So
they don't want to admit that.
Yeah. So thank you to everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later. Bye.
If you'd like to get in contact with us or follow us on our social media, we are on Instagram and Twitter at crime_divers_pod. You can email us at crime_divers_pod@outlook.com. We're on YouTube, and that's Crime Divers Podcast, and TikTok is also Crime Divers Podcast. If you would like to financially support the show, you could go to www.buymeacoffee.com/crimedivers and make a one-off donation. Our Patreon is patreon.com/crimedivers. We have 3 tiers, which is £1, £3 or £5, and you get bonus episodes, early access to episodes, and ad-free episodes.
And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.